We're going to close with a session where we update things that are happening in the global LHON community. And I'm going to just do one piece a little bit out of order. And I'd like Anne Simonson from UMDF to come in and just maybe introduce yourself, explain what you're here for, because it's a wonderful reason.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lissa. Hello, everybody. I introduced myself this morning during the group introductions and was here for several sessions. I hope you've had a wonderful day full of education and community. As I mentioned this morning, I'm Anne Simonson. I work for the United Mitochondrial Disease Foundation. I am a regional coordinator in the Great Lakes area. I'm based out of the Twin Cities in Minnesota, and I support 8 states in that surrounding area for the UMDF, which includes all of you if you live in those states, for any support for families, affected individuals, the events, advocacy, awareness, connection to the medical community, that we have in that area. So we're a resource for you as your regional coordinators. There are 4 of us at the UMDF that cover the US. So if you do not know who your regional coordinator is at the UMDF, go onto our website and there is a tab where you can find their name and you can email to them, call them, reach out, introduce yourself. I've had the opportunity to meet so many of you from my region here today, but I'm here to talk to you about a very special young man from my region, Michael Malika, who I met 3 years ago, thank you, Michael, 3 years ago for the first time, when Michael and his mother attended our symposium just weeks after receiving information about Michael's diagnosis. And they live in Minnesota with me. We're actually not very far from each other in Minnesota. And so we've connected and have been resources for each other in the area. And Michael and his family have been such a significant presence in our community, not only for the LHON community, but for so many other mitochondrial families in Minnesota and the Great Lakes area, and have set such a significant example for what it means to be someone who is not being a victim, but being empowered to try to help others and to make their life mean something and to give back. And I know that many of you may know about this, but the UMDF on a yearly basis has a program where we recognize volunteers, national volunteers, and recognize them for their contributions to our foundation. We are the largest provider of medical research funds outside of the national government, but we are a small organization. We like to think of ourselves as mitochondria. We are, small but powerful, right? So we rely on our volunteers so much to be able to continue to be that small organization, not an organization of even 30 people or 50 people or 100 people. That funds that you are raising, that money that you are using to support the UMDF goes to our mission, goes to research, goes to educational programs like this, goes to support families. And that is the most important thing that we really take pride in. But it takes help from volunteers to be able to do that. So we really like to recognize that and try to do that as much as possible. We have a number of national volunteer awards, and this year, Michael Malika was selected to receive the National LEAP Award of all volunteers for 2017. And LEAP stands for living, encouraging, achieving, and persisting. And at Michael's young age of 17, right? Okay, there we go. He is such an amazing example of that. If you haven't had an opportunity to sit down and talk to this young man, please do that. We're so honored to be able to recognize him tonight at our banquet. All of you are invited. If you don't have a banquet ticket already, we are selling banquet tickets down at the registration desk, so come on to the banquet. It's a beautiful time because we recognize our volunteers, we award our research. We have some other real special things that will be happening as well. It's a wonderful time to be able to celebrate what we have done as a community, what we are trying to do to make a difference in mitochondrial disease and in the lives of all of your loved ones. So just congratulations so much to Michael. He's such a wonderful representation of your community. I feel honored to know him. I feel like his family is my family, and just appreciate the time to be able to talk to you. Thank you.
Michael, would you come up and tell the group a little bit about your experiences?
Hello, my name is Michael Malika. So obviously she told you about what the LEAP Award is, but I already had prepared a speech, so I'll just read it anyways. So tonight I will be honored in receiving the UMDF's LEAP Award, which stands for Living, Encouraging, Achieving, and Persisting through a mitochondrial disorder. And this award is given to individuals under the age of 18. We all have a story we can share. Since being diagnosed in 2014, my family and I have done a Dinner in the Dark fundraiser netting over $33,000 for LHON research. Set up a team for LHON for the Minnesota Energy for Life Walk. I spoke to the Southwest Deanery of Catholic Women, and my most favorite was speaking to my peers who were working on being confirmed. I am currently a teen ambassador for the UMDF. I attend family meetings and am willing to contact other teens that need an ear as they go through their diagnosis or are just having a bad day. This summer will be the first year that the Minnesota Energy for Life Walk will have media coverage. I will be in Rockstar Row on Twin Cities Live in Minneapolis, and I will be interviewed on Fox 9 Sunday morning show by our own walk MC, Fox 9 and TV news anchor Leah Bino. The UMDF has regional coordinators throughout the United States, and even though in our Minnesota group we are not all affected by LHON, all of us have the same goals, and that is to fight and to find a cure and to support one another. Adults and teens, please contact your ambassador. Newly diagnosed families need others to talk to, and it doesn't matter if the diagnosis is the same. We are all mito warriors.
A wonderfully worthy award recipient. So excited. While we're talking about wonderful and exciting awards, we're going to preview another award that's going to be happening tonight. And to do that, I'd like the Chief Scientific Officer of the UMDF, Phil Yeski, to join us. You haven't had a chance to hear from Phil, so come on in.
Thank you. Definitely not worthy of applause, but Michael, that was really inspirational. So thanks for sharing those words with us, and congratulations. Yeah, so I'm here to talk a little bit about the foundation. I always share with my colleagues, LHON is a mitochondrial disease. Mitochondrial disease is UMDF. That means LHON is UMDF. So we want you to feel a part of this community. You are a part of this community. And we're always looking for ways to help build those bridges and make those ties even closer. You're so fortunate to have a passionate advocate like Lissa on your side, very much on your side, who pushes me, right, to make things happen within the foundation, and that's a good thing. And so we're taking steps to really make that happen. You may have heard today that Dr. Nancy Newman, who spoke earlier today, has joined our Scientific and Medical Advisory Board. So this was a big step, and from my perspective, in bringing that perspective, right, to our overall scientific and medical advisory group. So we really look forward to partnering with Nancy and advancing the cause of neuro-ophthalmology within mitochondrial disorders. Secondly, our grant program, as you may have heard, refocused this year, and we ran a cycle where we asked for very specific kinds of proposals around biomarker development. And biomarkers are representative of the disease, so ways we can measure the disease, sometimes directly, sometimes indirectly. And as it turns out, through a very rigorous peer review process, we ended up selecting an LHON-focused award. So now we would like to bring the recipient of that award, Rustam Karanjayat, up to the podium and make a small presentation. Woo! Yeah, maybe you should say a few words.
Dr. Karan, just a little bit later, he's got some slides, so he's going to tell you a little bit more about the actual research he's going to do, so we'll do that later. But
Yeah,
if people can't read what the award says, this is an award that was co-funded through, some of you know that we do an LHON project fund, and we partnered with the UMDF. It was largely, it was a full cycle through UMDF, but again, it was LHON related, so we helped. So the amount on the check is
$100,000.
Holy shit.
So we'll have Dr. Kranja come back later. Thank you so much, Phil.
By the way, he was worried he was going to have to carry this check across the border. We assured him that would not be the case. You wouldn't get fired.
Take 10 people.
Okay. So going back to the update on the community.
Great, we're 100 grand up.
I always like to talk a little bit about how the community is growing. The database that we talked about earlier, I'm keeping track of about 5,500 people who are associated with LHON in a variety of ways around the world. People who are, affected carriers, loved ones, friends. We have the global Facebook group that has over 3,200 people now, and it's very active. I've got an email list of over 1,400 people that I communicate with regularly about things related to LHON, like coming to this conference. Many of you got those emails. And we've got well over 120 people here at this conference today, largest group ever, and thank you all for coming. Hope it keeps growing. It was mentioned earlier that a few years ago after the conference, people who attended, Jessica Loomer, Andy Marks, Maria Johnson, all said, we can't wait till next year to do this again. This is just too cool. So a monthly conference call was started. Many of you are a part of it, and those of you who are not, please find out from someone who is, just find out more about it. It is the first Wednesday of every month, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 Pacific. It's a toll-free call from anywhere around the world. I just gave our Brazilian friend the toll-free number from Brazil last night, so no excuses. Everybody can call in. We generally have about 30 callers. There's a guest speaker who will talk. And one thing to know is you don't have to speak up. We'll ask you if you're on the line, and if you want to say, hey, you're welcome to, but you can just listen in. You don't have to talk. And it's for people who are affected or not, carriers, loved ones, just listening, you can sort of get a sense of things going on, and you learn all kinds of things on the calls. It's a lot of fun. And then actually, about a year ago, we record the calls, but then we turn off the recording, and some of the more interesting conversation happens after the recording. So, but there are recordings, and off to the right on that slide are, we keep track of when the call was and who the guest speaker was. So if there's someone you've kind of gotten to know here, maybe they were one of the speakers, or you can just listen to various calls. And the group who runs it is always open to suggestions. So if you send an email to lhonlive@gmail.com, the folks who run the monthly calls would be very happy to hear from you and talk about possibilities to have on the monthly call. Another thing I want to talk about is not only connecting here and not only connecting on the monthly calls, but just connecting in person in small groups. Coincidentally and wonderfully, Maria lives in San Diego, as I do. So we've sort of got this thing going where when folks come to Southern California, they might reach out to one of us. And so we've got, photos here of various situations where somebody will contact one of us and say they're coming to town, and it's like, okay, LHON field trip. And, I'll pick her up. I do the driving. And, we'll get together for coffee, lunch, dinner, whatever works for someone. And, we've done it where we'll just get together with, one person or a couple families come to town, but it's always a great opportunity to just have conversation and connection. And the connecting doesn't have to be just in Southern California. There's photos up here of various places where connections have happened. Many of them have happened in places where my son Jeremy, you might have heard about if you haven't, he's been mentioned today, but he happens to be a professional inspirational speaker. So because he does that as a career, he travels a lot. And because I have a database, I'll reach out to folks when he's coming to town and say, hey, does anyone want to get together? And here are photos of many of those gatherings that have taken place this year. And it's great because people will step up. Down in the center bottom, it says Hartford, and you might recognize John Knox, who said, yeah, I'll host everyone in my home. I was like, thank you very much, right? He's never met anyone in the community, and he, and Ian and his mom were there, and it was great. I wasn't there, but I know Jeremy came home real excited about it. I was in Boston, and I got to meet Howard and Elizabeth. They treated me to lunch and a nice hike, and saw where Paul Revere was captured. Just a variety of gatherings. Corey, there's New Jersey and there's Philadelphia, and Corey Lloyd, if you haven't met Corey Lloyd, if you could talk about what it was like for you to just go to those events.
Okay. Yeah, it's beautiful to see the community grow as much as it is. I had the pleasure of going to those two events with my brother, Mike, and I even mentioned it to him today, like how the community is getting bigger but smaller. Like there's Australia here and Brazil and Canada, and as well as the United States. But the smaller get-togethers I had a great time, and I would strongly encourage anyone to go to one if there happens to be one in your area. It gives you the opportunity to meet people who are in your area if you didn't know they existed before. It's not like you have to fly across the country to meet up with someone who may be going through a similar situation to yours, like other LHON families. So like Lissa said, her son Jeremy came. He had a few speaking engagements, and we had the opportunity to meet up face-to-face, talk with other people in the area. The New Jersey one was fun, as well as Philadelphia. We met Maria and her son, who are here today. And we also met people who you may talk to on Facebook or the monthly phone call, and put a face or a figure in some cases to a voice. And it's just a great experience, and sharing different tips and tricks or life experiences, and seeing how much in common you have with those people. Everyone who tells their first year story always finds the commonality between between their stories and someone else. So, like I said, I would strongly recommend if there's an opportunity that presents itself in your area to attend one of these smaller events.
Thanks, Corey. And it's not just like my family traveling around. There's a photo up there with Mark DeMonis, who got together in Canada at a hockey event, surprising, with Blake from San Diego. Actually, well, Jeremy was in, it doesn't have to be in the US. Jeremy was with his fiancee Ellen in Amsterdam, so I found somebody in Amsterdam that wanted to get together. And then, shockingly, Wayne and Susie got some folks together in Florida. And Lisa and her mom Pat in Canada, Winnipeg. So again, it can be anywhere, anytime, any reason. And again, I'm more than happy to connect with people, and you get the sense, right? People are happy. When I first did this, I thought people were going to think I was weird, but fortunately, I ran into people like Wayne and Susie who said, "This is cool. Let's keep doing it." So we keep doing it, and it seems to work. Another thing that's happened since we were last together, a couple of years ago, I said it would be helpful if, in addition to having the large global Facebook group, it would be really nice to have more local or regional Facebook groups. And that's been happening in various locations. So there's groups now in New England, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Ohio, the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, the Carolinas, Arkansas, Georgia, Florida, Pacific Northwest, California, Southwest. So if you live in any of those areas and aren't in your local group, it's a great thing to do because it helps make the local connections. You can talk about local resources. And sometimes I'll start it if, like, Jeremy's going somewhere or giving a talk and I try and pull the group together, or I'm going somewhere, but sometimes it's homegrown. For instance, a couple of years ago, Susie came to one of the conferences and...
Well, Lisa had mentioned starting some of these regional groups, and so she asked me to, and I said, yeah. So I did a Florida LHON, and that's exactly what it's called on Facebook. And it's really nice because somebody will ask to join, and it might be somebody who's affected. It might be family members who are in Florida and they have a loved one in another state, but or vice versa. And it's nice because somebody will join and they've just been affected and they're in Jacksonville, Florida. And I can say, oh, there's some other people in here from Jacksonville, and I'll bet you don't live too far. And then they get together, just might not have anything to do with us, but it kind of gives you a smaller microcosm of something like this. And we have met a lot of people. I think we're the only ones from Florida here today. Is anybody else here from Florida? I didn't think so.
I wish.
Yeah. So yeah, when we went around, I didn't think so. But people when they come down to visit, we have friends from Canada when they come down. Carolyn, they come down. We visit with them and get together, and we'll try to get the picture that was up there before. There's a newly affected gentleman and his wife moved from New York to Florida. They drove, I think, 2 hours over to Orlando, and we drove an hour south to Orlando because we're about an hour north. And we met up for dinner. And, of course, we were the first LHON people that he had ever met. And it's just nice to have something in common. So I strongly suggest, if there isn't an LHON Facebook page for your state, it's not rocket science. Just set it up, talk to Liz if you want to know how to do it, but just start a page. And people will join. And just like you found the global LHON page, people will find your state page. And another mention is, because some people today, or last night and today, have mentioned they didn't know, there's an LHON to LHON group just for affected people on Facebook. You have to actually be affected. It's somewhere that they can, and Wayne is one of the administrators on that, and he can approve you, as well as a few others. And it's just a nice, safe place for those who are affected to talk just amongst themselves. They don't have to worry about their mom listening and, or seeing their question typed or something like that. And it's a nice, safe place. So I just want to throw that out there.
Thanks, Susie. And it's not a ton of work. It's just a little bit of
No,
interest.
no.
And like she said,
Easy.
either people will find you or I'll help people find you.
Yes.
Because again, that's why I've been holding onto the database so that I can then find people in a particular location and drive people to it. So if you're interested, work with me so we can build local community. In addition to what's going on in the U.S., globally, there's been a lot going on. And what you see here are the groups in countries around the world alphabetically. So you've got Australia, New Zealand, Brazil, Denmark, Finland, France, Germany, Austria, Switzerland together, France, Latin America, Netherlands, Philippines, Portugal, Scotland, Spain, Sweden, UK. So there's groups all around the world, and I make the same invitation to anyone who's not in the room but watching this video someday in the future. Feel free to contact me. And again, I do keep track of people around the world, and I have helped some of these groups get members, and it's good for everybody, right? It's people are trying to find each other, in various locations. One country in particular I wanted to spend a little time talking about. We have quite a few folks here from Canada, and there's a lot going on that's exciting. And on our panel right now, we have two folks who I'll let introduce themselves and talk about who they are, what they're doing, and how that all relates to Canada. Mark Demonis, Lisa Thompson.
Cool. Thank you very much. And again, a big thank you to Lissa. There's no question. I know I personally wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you, and I'm sure everyone else here can speak to that. So thank you very much, Lissa, for everything you do. I think it was Robin Williams that once said, Canada's just a quiet loft over one really big party. That makes perfect sense. And it's funny because no matter who we are, despite mutation or place of origin or whatnot, the one thing we all have in common is that we all have shared this common journey, and that's really important. So a few things I just wanted to share here, a bit about Canada. Wanted to recognize a few folks that are here from Canada, aside from Lisa Thompson and myself. So if I can just have Lisa McGregor, Pat Smith, Francis Konecki, James Konecki, Estelle Cote, Kevin Boland, and you know what? What the heck? Can I please have the Knox family, the expats, also please stand too? If you can please stand, just so we can just... It takes a lot of commitment and resources to make a trip out like this to DC, and a bit about Canada. So now that we recognize the Canadians, this is the fun part. The Canadians can't say anything else now at this point. We just want to have a quick trivia for all you folks. Number one, how many provinces are in Canada, folks? I heard 5, 6. Whoever gets it. 11. 7. Okay. Hey, this is hilarious. This truly is one big party. Anyway, there are 10 provinces in Canada. Does anyone know how many territories there are? There's 2, and there's an expansion. It's kind of like the NHL draft. So there's not a Las Vegas territory. There's a 3rd territory. There are 3 territories. There's Northwest Territory, Yukon, and Nunavut. Another few things about Canada. Our national winter sport. Hockey. Wow, that's incredible. I can't believe you guys figured that one out. Okay, our national summer sport. That's hilarious. It's lacrosse. Okay. Our prime minister's name.
Justin Trudeau.
Yeah, I know. We all know our prime minister's name, and unfortunately, we try to forget yours sometimes. Prime Minister, President. Anyway. One of the things about Canada that's so unique about the situation that we always define ourselves as Canadians is no matter who you are, where you're from coast to coast, from Newfoundland and Labrador, right to Vancouver Island, which is someone to my left here might be from Vancouver Island. The greatest thing about all of us is that no matter what the initiative is or the cause or whatever it is, we always try to find a way to get behind it. So for my own personal experience, again, my name is Mark DeMontis. I'm 30 years old. I've been affected for 13 years. And I have the 11778 mutation. Did I even say the mutation name right? I'm not even perfect. Amazing. Okay. I have the 11778 mutation. I lost it when I was 17. And I have to say, I've been really involved in the blind community in Canada very heavily through my experience with blind hockey, if you could imagine that, someone who goes blind wanting to get involved in hockey. And but I've never been involved in the LHON community, and it was a conversation over the years with Lissa that has kind of said, you know, Mark, why don't you get involved with the LHON community? And I've always thought, you know, it's all very research based. It's all very research based, and I never really, I kind of really shun. Did I shun you? I'm sorry, Lissa.
It's okay.
I'm sorry. But the point is that one of the things that's so fascinating about this group is that this is not just about research. There's so much more to this than that. And one of the things in Canada that we want to be able to do is very similar as we share it here. We want to continue to connect Canadians. And I say that because when I was 21 years old, it was the first time in my life, so I guess that's 4 years after I was affected, I met the first person ever with LHON. And just to give you an idea, I was extremely overweight. I was in the midst of a depression, and I was severely unhealthy. To the point where the first person I ever met with LHON completely changed my life, to the point where I literally changed my life to the point where I had packed my bags, decided to change my own life because it was going on the wrong path, strapped on a pair of rollerblades and rollerbladed 5,000 kilometers from Toronto to Vancouver to raise funds for blind hockey in Canada. Just to give you an idea, well, the point of it is just to give you an idea, is I truthfully understand the impact that someone with LHON can have in someone's life. And to be able to do that here and to connect with others with LHON, we want to be able to continue this theme across the country. In order to do that, separate to having an unbelievable Facebook page that the folks have started well before I ever imagined I'd ever be a part of an LHON community, we want people to dig a little deeper and to be able to find out how we can connect more and more Canadians together. With over 33 million Canadians, there's no question folks have LHON, and there's many more that have it than the ones that are here today. But it's the ones that are here today that we thank, because it's the motivation that they'll be able to give to others who have LHON to be able to come to the annual conference and to be able to jump on the monthly calls and whatnot. So having said that, I've been able to work with Lisa Thompson and many others who are in the room here today, and a few others who couldn't be here, Alistair Taylor and Jocelyn Cote, who have also played a big leadership role recently, to try and see what we can do in Canada. And fortunately enough, there's been many developments on the community side trying to build a Canadian foundation, because we have someone who you just recently were introduced to, who is leading in research in Canada for this very condition. So I'm going to pass over to Lisa to talk a bit about Dr. Rustam Karangia out of Ottawa and the amazing work he's doing and how we can collaborate with both the community in Canada and the unbelievable research he's doing. So, Lisa?
I think we've been really lucky. We've gained Dr. Karangia from, he's working with Dr. Sajoon, and he's now working up at Ottawa Hospital. So we now have somebody who is connected with Dr. Sajoon, and also somebody where patients in Canada can go to. And for us, it's also a way of us being able to develop an organization where we can start to think about developing a conference and developing more of a leadership role to new people that come along, and that's really what we're trying to gain, is starting that groundwork. And yeah, anything else that you want to say?
I would say just to add to that, very similarly how we've welcomed, everyone here in the U.S. has welcomed Canadians to the conference. There's no question at a Canadian conference we would be welcoming everyone from the United States and abroad as well, no matter where you are in the world. That's just one thing we want to share. There's lots happening in Canada. We thank Lissa very much. We thank Dr. Karangia very much, and the Canadian contingent that's here. But as well, we look forward to sharing more about what's happening in Canada, and we know that our first conference, everyone will find out, because the quiet lounge above the big party in the U.S. is going to turn into a big party as well. So thank you, everyone. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Lisa. Quick story, I do have to share that one of the exciting things about LHON is how it's cyclical. In other words, when Mark talks about that rollerblade journey he was on many years ago. That happened to be right after my son lost vision, and I connected with someone who connected me with someone who connected me with him. And I called this person. I knew nothing about him, but someone told me I needed to talk to him, and he was in some van with a bunch of people, and he was about to do a media interview, and he was rollerblading across Canada, and I was in the depths of despair about what was going to happen to my son. And he gave me this image of, oh, he can do cool stuff. And it's amazing how things come full circle, and one person inspires another who then inspires another. So that's what this community is all about. In addition to community education, Maria mentioned it earlier, we do have all the conference videos on the umdf.org site. If you look under types/LHON, you'll find years of material of these conferences, and today's event will be posted shortly. But there's scientific information, as you now know. There's community type information, but it's a great resource. There's new materials coming in. As Maria was going over earlier, there's new blogs, new podcasts, exciting ways to get information that's helpful. Awareness, media, different people telling different stories, getting picked up in various media. So even though LHON is not known, it gets known. It's a powerful story. People want to hear about it. We get a lot of awareness through athletes also. In terms of the Paralympics, it was a pretty exciting time for LHON. We had 5 folks participating in the Paralympics this year. We have had Chaz Davis as a runner from the U.S., Tucker Dupree, a swimmer from the U.S., Peter Ryan, a cyclist from Ireland, Fabrizio Sotilli, a swimmer from Italy, and Jeremy McClure, a swimmer from Australia. So a lot of great representation in the Paralympic community. And it's not just Paralympics. Running seems to be a big thing in the LHON community. There's the California International Marathon each year in Sacramento, where they have 20 to 30 vision impaired runners. And if you can see the photo that's on the right, there are 3 gentlemen standing there for the podium at this year's CIM, and first, second, third, all LHON runners. So the community of blind athletes is very well aware of LHON. They think our mutation has some superhuman element to it. So who knows, something for Dr. Kranja and Dr. Newman to study. And the Boston Marathon, I actually had the privilege of being there this year, since my daughter's in Boston right now, and I got to see one of our, Adrian Broca, is going around the corner to the finish line, holding up his cane and representing LHON. It was great. And it's not just Paralympics, it's not just running. There are so many other sports. We've got some amazing baseball players. Joe McCormick is on the upper right there, and he's on the Boston Renegades. I think they have 4 LHON players. The team in Texas, I heard Guillermo Lopez, I met up with him, and they have, Guillermo Lopez is in the bottom right there, and he's on a team in Texas. He said they have 5 LHON players. Blind golf, I'm particularly interested in, because in the upper left there, that would be my son Jeremy with his dad guiding him, and he does a lot of blind golf. Blind hockey, of course, thanks to Mark, and that's actually making a move into the U.S. Tandem cycling, always a good thing for LHON, especially when the LHON person's on the back. Good place to start, though. If you're looking for sports that somebody who's visually impaired can do, look for things like that where the vision impairment doesn't get in the way. Goalball, it's a sport designed for people with vision impairment. The Warrior Games, again, that's on the lower right-hand corner. That's I met someone at Camp Pendleton, Guillermo Lopez, who was recently affected, and the military's got a great program for folks who have vision or any kind of disability, and just so much more. So again, it raises awareness, and it's a great community building opportunity. Another way awareness of LHON is being raised in the medical community. and this is where the connection with Dr. Nancy Newman has been so valuable. She is the past president of NANOS. NANOS is the North American Neuro-Ophthalmology Society. So that's where people like Dr. Newman, Dr. Karanja, and a lot of people who deal with LHON from a research and clinical care side get together and share information that's if you thought some of today's sessions were difficult to follow, very interesting. But it's where neuro-ophthalmologists get together, and they happened to be in San Diego 3 years ago. So Dr. Newman created or worked with the organization to allow patient advocacy organizations to exhibit there. So I've been going for 3 years now, and I just chat with folks and pass out a card and tell them that we have an LHON group, and it raises awareness. And now they're beginning to recognize me, and they tell me, yep, they told their patients about the community, and that's why we keep doing it. And if anyone is looking for a neuro-ophthalmologist, this is a link that I often share, because NANOS is a great place to find a neuro-ophthalmologist, because if someone is a member of NANOS, that would be someone who's aware of what's going on in the world. There was discussion earlier today about finding someone, so it is a good resource.
Is it nanos.org or something?
It's not quite that simple, and I didn't write it down. But if you look for North American Neuro-Ophthalmology Society, it's not that simple, because that takes you somewhere else. So I also wanted to talk, we have been talking today about clinical trials, so you actually did hear a lot already from Dr. Newman. So, just reiterating, it is an exciting time for LHON. There are clinical trials, for instance, in Bascom Palmer with Dr. Guy, who is working right now with very newly affected patients with gene therapy. And then GenSight, as you heard, has the 2 trials underway. One is closed to recruiting, one just has a few spaces open. But again, it's an exciting time to have 3 clinical trials underway in gene therapy. Santhera, a Swiss company that has been doing research and development of a drug that is idebenone in a pharmaceutical grade. They've got approval for it in Europe, and they are on clinicaltrials.org. You can find information about a trial that's opening up for people who've been affected 5 years or less, any of the 3 primary mutations, never used idebenone. So if you've ordered idebenone over the internet, for instance, you wouldn't be a candidate. But they did have a table outside. They have been a generous sponsor for this kind of event. And if you wanted to pick up one of the brochures, it does explain more details about the trial. Stealth-BioTherapeutics, you heard about that earlier from Dr. Amel Kara, and she led the Power 2. And there's an upcoming Repower study, which is mitochondrial myopathy, which again, only a subgroup of people in the LHON community would participate in, but it's exciting that that product is crossing over into the LHON plus / mitochondrial myopathy world. And also, there's a small trial called Recite with 12 patients, and it's fully recruited, but it's underway, and it's the same drug. And again, it's exciting that for a rare disease, there's a lot of exciting things happening, opportunities and development that we're a part of in terms of patients participating. I wanted to take a quick moment to invite Chris Engelstad. Many of you have heard from her at some of our other conferences, but she's going to explain to you a couple of things that are happening with a group called NAMDAC. And Chris, if you'll explain what she does better than I.
How do I advance? The green?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you, Lissa, for allowing me to speak to you all. You have a wonderful organization. I'm so proud of what Lissa is doing, and the community that you've all built is really amazing and powerful. We have, many of you have already heard of the North American Mitochondrial Disease Consortium, otherwise known as NAMDAC. NAMDAC is a patient contact registry, and biobank. I know many people have wanted to be involved in NAMDAC, but are not necessarily at one of the centers that has NAMDAC recruitment or consent. And I will be telling you a little bit later how you can get involved. The purpose of NAMDAC is to find patients for clinical trials, studies, and to find data for researchers. The types of data that we would maintain are patient symptoms, various lab reports, the genetics of your disease, and some people, they may not even know if they, they may have not had genetic testing yet. That's okay, you can still be in the NAMDAC database. The healthcare professionals, doctors, nurses, genetic counselors, all populate the database so we know that who's in there actually has a mitochondrial disorder or a possible mitochondrial disorder. And we can take blood or fibroblasts. Those might be used by some of the investigators in NAMDAC. There's 16 different investigators. There are doctors and researchers and people that have been in the mitochondrial world for many, many years and are doing a lot of good work. So both patients, people that know you have, in this case LHON, as well as their carrier relatives can be involved in NAMDAC. So you're not excluded if you don't have a disorder. So again, NAMDAC has historically consisted of these 16 different sites in several places. Again, lots of doctors that are involved in both medical care as well as research. Now you can participate not only at the local sites, but I know, as Lissa was telling me, many of you don't go to the local sites because you see different people that are involved in neuro-ophthalmology, and they're not always the mitochondrial specialists. Likewise, people are all over the nation and up in Canada, so they may not even be near a local site, and again, we only have 16 of them. So you can actually get enrolled by remote enrollment, and that is basically sitting at your computer at home and getting enrolled. It's not a real difficult thing to do. You'll go on namdac.org, and you'll find it's an interactive website where you'll get an ID number, a password, and then you enter the system, enter your medical records by scanning them in. Somebody from Columbia University will call you and go through the consent process. Prior to doing that, they'll look at your records to make sure you actually have a mito disorder or you're a carrier of one of the mutations or an obligate carrier. Obligate carrier means that you are related maternally to somebody with a mito disorder in the mitochondrial genome. So medical professionals review your records. They'll call you to get consent or talk about consent. You can do consent, again, right on your home computer. And then once the data is in there, which you've already put in there, then our healthcare professionals will enter the data into the database. It's very simple to use. And we did not have this before, so it's wonderful that we have it now, and we're encouraging people to get their data into the NAMDAC database. Here's just a picture of what you will see when you go into namdac.org, namdc.org. I already talked about this. Remote enrollment, Dr. Xiomara Rosales works at the Columbia University site. If you have questions about the site, you can certainly get a hold of her. Her email is namdac@columbia.edu. And I know that these talks today will be available to you afterwards. So if you didn't write it down, don't worry about it. The other thing I'm here to talk about, not for the males with the mutations, but for their female carrier relatives. As we all know, carrier relatives, the females can also carry these mutations in the mitochondrial DNA. And one concern for them is having children that might be affected by the mitochondrial DNA or by the LHON mutations. So I'm not going to go through all of this, but many of you have heard about mitochondrial replacement therapy. Basically, that's a mechanism of creating a fertilized egg that has low to no mutation load. Briefly, we take a healthy donor egg and take out the female carrier, the mito female carrier's nucleus, and put it into the healthy donor egg that does not have a nucleus and fertilize it. At this point, we're freezing these fertilized eggs. because we need to address the FDA to be able to actually implant those at some point. Those eggs are actually good for a period of time. There's been reports of women that have gotten eggs, pertained in early 20s, but not even, I mean, Janet Jackson had a baby at 50, so, she didn't do that by natural means. So these eggs are good for quite a while. But we are doing that now at Columbia University. We have an IRB-approved protocol, and we're covering all the costs. The costs are about $30,000. So if you're interested in doing it, you should get a hold of us sooner than later, while we still have money to be able to do this. So we're looking for women between 20 and 40 years of age that are known or obligate carriers of the mitochondrial DNA mutation. Obligate carrier, again, is female relatives of somebody affected. They should have a partner or spouse. We also do see alternative partners. We know there's other types of relationships that might be eligible for this also. And I won't go through all that, but it involves 3 different visits. The use of hormones, oocyte retrieval. You'll come to New York City 3 different times. And again, the costs are covered for travel, hotel, and all the procedures. So if you're at all interested, now's the time to take advantage. We will only have a certain number of patients. Right now we have 6 women that are going through these procedures. And again, this would be open to females that are known or obligate carriers of one of the LHON mutations, and obviously other people that have mutations in the mitochondrial DNA. So thank you so much, Lissa, for giving me the time to talk to you.
Thank you so much. It's all going to be on the slides that'll be eventually, but go ahead and, take 1 second. Okay. There's the contact info. But again, this is all being videoed, and we will post it all, so it'll be a great opportunity to get anything that's missed. Just to talk a little bit about other things being done in the community, real briefly, I did get that grant last year to do the LHON Genealogy project. We did a presentation on it last year. Brianne talked about it. I actually had the opportunity, the grant came from Global Genes, and at their gala this year, Maria and I went actually, and I had the opportunity to talk about the project because they thought it was so innovative and exciting. So I got to stand up in front of 600 folks and tell what we had done. And just, again, it's an opportunity to share the LHON story with a group of scientists and medical professionals. And I did present a poster about that project at the National Society of Genetic Counselors, at Nanos that I mentioned before, and I actually presented that yesterday here. It's on display here at the UMDF sessions. Also recently received another grant to do some LHON support. There's a group called IICF, and they gave the LHON project a small grant to do a little pilot program on improving how we provide support to families. And in terms of, that's grant receiving. Now in terms of grant giving, since the LHON project has been around, one of the first grants that the LHON project gave was for work done by Dr. Sadoun's team, as well as Dr. Kranja, for an LHON mood study. And if you were at last year's conference, you heard Dr. Kranja talk about the results of the study. And so that video is on that list of videos from prior conferences. So we funded that project back in 2014. Dr. Kranja presented the results at last year's conference, and then since then a couple of papers have been published. So it's exciting when our group raises money, gives it to researchers, things get published, and there's more work actually in development, more papers yet to be written. You saw earlier the notion of when UMDF does its grant cycle, and they study, they take all kinds of folks to receive grants, and they do a comprehensive review process. And when they do select a project that's LHON related, they do reach into the LHON project and ask if we'd like to co-fund. And back in 2015, there was a grant given, and the person who received it, I just wanted you to hear a little bit from Dr. Adaf Tauhid about what he did with the award he won back in 2015.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for this wonderful opportunity. My name is Atif Tauhid, and I am a postdoctoral fellow with Dr. Doug Wallace at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. My project focuses on evaluating a unique gene therapy approach for LHON. Leber's hereditary optic neuropathy has features which involve sudden onset blindness in 20s and 30s, resulting in central scotoma or vision loss, and it is caused by mitochondrial DNA mutations. The panel on the top right-hand corner shows the eye of the affected individual. Below that is just to show the complexity of the transmission of the disease and that it is maternally inherited with a male bias. On the left-hand panel, I'm not going to go into the sequences of mitochondrial DNA sequence, but I would like to mention that my project is focused on a unique cell hybrid model that was developed in the Wallace lab that has a mutation in ND6 gene. ND6 gene that is encoded by the mitochondrial DNA is known to cause 15% of the LHON cases. So the gene therapy strategy that I'm utilizing in my project is to target a normal copy of the RNA into the mitochondria. This is also known as allotopic RNA expression, and this involves a unique, a normal copy of ND6 in this case, which is tagged with a sequence that can take this mRNA or the normal copy of the gene inside the mitochondria. And because the mitochondria has the machinery to endogenously translate it into a normal copy of the protein, this will be incorporated into a functional complex. So that is on the top panel is the general schematic of how the constructs of these gene therapy vectors are designed. So I won't be going into a lot of details with the results and the backgrounds, but I thought it would be great to share two key pieces of data that I have gotten so far using the gene therapy vectors that we have developed in the Wallace lab. This, as a summary, we find cells with mitochondrial dysfunction showing phenotypes closer to normal cells after the gene therapy rescue. In the left-hand panel, it's the mitochondrial content, and then there are four bars in that graph. The extreme left, the black-colored graph, is the control cells, and this is the mitochondrial content, how much mitochondria is present in the cell. The second graph, which is red in color, is the mitochondrial mutant cells, and we can see that it has more mitochondria, and we would expect that because the cells are lacking ATP, and the cells tell the mitochondria that you need to make more ATP, but because it has a mutation, it is unable to. So as a compensation mechanism, it undergoes biogenesis and it creates more mitochondria. The next two bars that we see are the results of mitochondrial content after the rescue from human, after the rescue using the human ND6 and the mouse ND6 genes. And it is evident that both those constructs are able to bring the mitochondrial content closer to normal, and that's what we want. The right-hand panel is the rate of lactate production. Again, the black bar is the normal cells, and the red, which is the mutant cells, has almost double the rate of lactate production. When we treat it with the gene therapy construct, at least one of them shows that it brings it back towards the normal levels. The last one is still undergoing testing, and we'll have more data. So currently, we are investigating more biochemical and physiological assays The ultimate goal is once we have 1 or 2 vectors that is working perfectly, we will transition them into an AAV vector system, which will then be injected and evaluated in an LHON mouse model that Dr. Wallace's lab has developed. So that's all that I have to share. I would like to acknowledge my mentor, Dr. Doug Wallace. He's a great mentor and one of the brilliant scientists, and it is my absolute honor to work with him. My esteemed CMEM members, a few of them who are sitting in the back, thank you so much. And of course, our collaborators, and all this wonderful project and collaborations are possible because of the UMDF and LHON project that fund my project, and of course, to such a wonderful and vibrant community. Thank you so much. You energize our project.
Thank you. And as you heard earlier, this year, the UMDF again selected an LHON-related project, and again, the work that was done by folks in this community to raise funding has helped co-fund that project, and Dr. Kranjia is going to just give you a very brief overview of what he's going to be working on.
Thank you, Lissa. So I understand that I'm the only one, I guess, standing between you and the end of the session. So I've been asked to be very quick and efficient as possible. I have a question for you, though. Of all of you who've actually been affected by LHON, how many of you have been to see a neuro-ophthalmologist? Can you put up your hands? And how many of you have done a visual field? And how many of you hated doing the visual field? Okay. So that basically is why we're doing what we're doing. So essentially, what we're looking at is we're trying to figure out a way to look at the data that we're getting from individual patients to try and understand what's going on in the disease in a way that allows us to be able to do interventions through clinical trials or through other methods to see how the progression of the disease is going over time in a reliably reproducible way. And eye diseases are really interesting and fascinating as a group, but it's a real challenge as an ophthalmologist to figure out what's going on in the eye. Most of the tests that we do with patients are subjective. They all involve you inputting and giving us an answer to a question. And when we do that, we end up with a large range. Your vision is going to fluctuate from day to day. A normal patient's vision is going to fluctuate from day to day. And if you're really tired and you get stuck inside that machine trying to do the visual field, you're going to do a lot worse job than if you were bright, happy, and well awake. So because of that, when we get into situations where we're looking at things like this, where we've got very dense central scotomas, we've got issues where the machine now is no longer within its receptive range, it's reached the bottom of its receptive range, it's going to have difficulties trying to pick up changes, it's going to try and have difficulties trying to pick up improvement. When we try and look at measures that don't rely on input from patients, we really have 2 different types of measures that we can look at. The first type of measure essentially is looking at the anatomy. We can look and see how the anatomy is changing over time. In that situation, we do something called an OCT-RNFL. And when there's also another variant of it, it's called a ganglion cell complex. And both of them are basically, you sit in front of a machine, it scans the back of your eye, and it takes a cross-sectional image of the back of your eye that then is converted into a measurement of the thickness of the retinal nerve fiber layer. Now, there's a challenge in Leber's in that there's swelling going on at the same time as the atrophy. So it's kind of hard to track an acute patient when they are going through the change from being a carrier to affected using OCT as an outcome measure. The other side of this is electrophysiology. And some of you who visited us at UCLA have been through these tests that we're talking about, and you've seen what we do. And essentially, what it involves is looking at a stimulus, either a light that flashes or a pattern that goes back and forth. And both of these have their advantages and have their disadvantages. But essentially, they're recording from the retinal ganglion cells. They're recording from the ganglion cells, and that is the component of the electrical activity that we're interested in. So the first one involves looking at this pattern that goes back and forth. But you can imagine that trying to look at this little X here, the red cross, is not the easiest thing to focus on. It's kind of like doing a visual field, but it's a really boring movie instead of being a really boring video game. So the other side of this is to use a full field stimulator, a stimulator that encompasses the entire eye. You get to see the back, and then you see a flash of light. And by using flashes of different frequencies and timing them accordingly, we're actually able to pick up a component that corresponds to the ganglion cell function. So we did this in patients who have other diseases, such as glaucoma, where the nerve itself is completely destroyed in one eye versus the other, and you can see that there's a significant difference in the component that they're picking up and the size of that response. This was also done in patients who have another disease called idiopathic intracranial hypertension, and it was shown to correlate with those visual fields I know you all love so much. So we did some testing in patients who come out to Los Angeles, and again, we were able to detect a response. This response was significantly smaller than that from the control population when we went back and looked at normal controls. And this led us, through some help from Stealth-BioTherapeutics, to do a study down in Brazil, where we were able to look at patients in Brazil who are all from the same pedigree. They all carry the 11778 mutation. This has some advantages because when you're dealing with a group of individuals and you have a lot of different mutations, you have a lot of different environments and other things that impact it, they're going to present differently and they're going to have different features from the disease. So these patients have been followed annually since 2001. And when we were down there, we were able to get some recordings from them. I think your battery's dead. Oh, okay. All right. And again, what we found was that we had a difference between the controls, the carriers, and the affecteds. And what was quite interesting to us was that some of the carriers also showed a much slower response than what we saw in the controls. Now, this is an area of quite a great deal of interest because we don't know what's going on with these individuals. We only have had the opportunity to record from them on a single occasion. But understanding this might give us a way to be able to either predict whether or not somebody's going to become affected or highlight the individuals that are more likely to become affected. And it also has implications for other mitochondrial diseases as well, because if we're showing that there's this range that's increased in individuals who carry any other types of mitochondrial diseases, it can be useful for outcome measures for other diseases also. We also found that if you cut off at -20, none of the normals had a response below -20, and none of the affecteds had a response above -20 microvolts. And this was reproducible across increasing light intensities. We've concentrated on the 1 candidate per second per meter squared, and if you ask any of the people who've been to LA, they'll tell you that this is bright enough, so certainly going up there was not necessary. And so this is where we're heading now. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to validate this. We're trying to understand this response more. We're trying to see in patients who are carriers as well, whether or not we're picking up the same variability, and we want to see across different mutations. The reason we're doing this is because we're trying to come out with good, concrete outcome measures so that when we do clinical trials and we do clinical studies, we don't miss a response because our testing technology is not good enough. So that's the purpose of this project, and it's going to be run out of 2 centers. I'm actually cross-affiliated in a way between the University of Ottawa Eye Institute and the Doheny Eye Institute at UCLA. And so both these sites will be recruiting patients, and we're going to be, our goal is to get 100 subjects from various mitochondrial diseases, especially Leber's. And certainly this project would not be possible without the support of LISA, the UMDF, and other people that you've met today. I just wanted to say, though, that as in terms for us, the most inspiring thing is you. So I would give yourselves a round of applause.
Thank you, Dr. Karanja. One thing that Phil and I have been talking about is should we do an RFP process just for LHON projects? These are, you've heard of a couple that came up through the broader UMDF cycle, but as the LHON community does do fundraising, and if we have funds available, maybe we could do a cycle purely for LHON projects. Okay. There you go. Which leads me to the topic of fundraising. It's exciting to hear about the research going on. I think it's exciting. I hope you all agree. This is the kind of stuff that we want to have more of, and to have that happen. When we can do fundraising, things we can do help contribute to these opportunities. There are so many ways fundraising can be done. We've got folks in the room who've done dinners in the dark, bike rides, golf tournaments, runs, in memory of, whatever the situation is, there's always an opportunity to do fundraising for LHON, and that can lead to the kind of research you've seen. Again, congratulations to Michael for his LEAP award. We did that earlier. And I do want to mention that while I'm glad everyone was here, this year, I hope you're ready to look ahead for next year. We will do this again a year from now. And the 2018 LHON conference will take place on Friday, June 29th. And there will again be a community connection event the evening preceding. And next year's destination is Nashville, Tennessee. So I do hope you'll all be there next year. And in the meantime, I invite anyone to get involved. The community, there's so much to be done, whether it's getting involved in connecting, as some of the folks up here have talked about. There's got to be some folks out there who know how to do grant writing and fundraising much better than I know how, and we could use some support there. If something comes into your mind where you see that there's a need, like creating a group in Canada and figuring out what's needed, and happy to help support a solution. So anyone who's got ideas to help the community, you can make a difference. Feel free to contact me at lhonpoints@aol.com. And with that, close the meeting. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.